Jon Cooper, Ourlads Guide to the NFL Draft. We didn't have him last week. It was kind of a busy week, the NFL Combine going on in Indianapolis. And so we have looked at it. We've had some of the stats, et cetera, some of the comments, whatever, John. Was there anything in particular, 2, 3, 4 different notes that you thought were the biggest, I guess, bullet points from Indianapolis?
Well, the way we look at it, they're running around in underwear. So, it's in football pads. They're not, so you got to take everything with a grain of salt. Quarterback performances is what everybody seems to be, thinking about. I guess Quinn Ewers struggled a little bit. Jackson Dart looked very good. So, those are some interesting things, that came out of that, from what I understand, in terms of, what they did. Some guys didn't work out, but some of the measurements are concerning to some people, in terms of Will Campbell, the big tackle. His wingspan, arm length is a concern for a left tackle. I'm not sure that's going to drop him. He's an awfully good player, but that's something that, people are talking about. One of the things that we look at is what we call wingspan differential, and so you take your actual wingspan and then subtract the height from that, and you come up with a differential. And we think that sometimes overcomes, at least statistically with the metrics, maybe that slightly shorter arms that some of these linebackers are showing up with, like Chris Paul Jr. And a couple other guys, that you could say that about. Mason Graham was another one, the big defensive tackle, +3 wingspan differential, even though his arms are a little bit less than ideal for that. But the way we look at it is, hey, watch him play, turn on the tape, and you see a great player there. So let's not take too much away from the combine and the measurements and some of the things. It's a great football player.
John, was there an issue with the measurements, like not lining up from a few weeks prior, and kind of like how big of a snag or a snafu is that? And obviously these measurements matter, but that was just something that I caught in looking around over the weekend.
Well, I know the one that comes to mind is Jalen Milroe, who had a less than 9 hand size. I looked at the quarterbacks, and everybody had at least a 9. And I know there's some years ago, I remember we were sitting at the Senior Bowl with an NFL head coach, and Dan Shanka was with us, and Dan would say, this kid can really play. We really like him. We had him at the Shrine Bowl. And the coach said, how big is his hands? And he said, well, he's only an 8 3/4. He's a reject for us. So it's ironic that Jalen Milroe's 8 3/4 or whatever it was, hand size went up to a 9 on 3/8 or whatever it was, at the combine. So I'm not sure, what the deal is with that. But, who was right, who's wrong. You would hope the combine gets it right because everybody's there. So yeah, I'll go with what the combine said.
Okay, Dan, after the John,
okay.
He's talking about Shanka there for a second. John, who is QB3 in your mind after the combine?
Had to ask me that, didn't you?
I did. I've heard all this Tyler Shuck stuff, and that, good for him, but like he's made out of paper mache. So would worry me if I was going to pick him.
Well, I'm going to defer to, and we're going to have a conversation tomorrow with the guy who does quarterbacks for us. I cross-check it. And right now, his feeling is that Jackson Dart would be the third quarterback from Mississippi. And after that, he feels there's a pretty good drop-off. And we haven't determined that yet. We're going to watch some film together, and we're going to try to talk through it and just see, where we're at. But right now, if Jackson Dart is probably the guy. Will Howard, I guess, did not throw very well, but I'm not concerned about that. He's been kind of hot and cold, anyway. And I think it's going to be up to the team that really wants a player. They like his size. They like his mechanics. They like the way he throws the ball. His production may not have been what they're looking for, but they may feel that we get him in our building, we can work with this kid. And that's going to determine where a lot of these quarterbacks are going to go. You're going to see a lot of them go, I think, in the mid rounds. 3rd through 6, through 3rd, 3 through 5. I think that's where you're going to see a lot of these quarterbacks go off the board after the first 2, maybe 3.
Jon Cooper with us, 365 Sports. You're right. They're in a bunch of underwear and T-shirts or whatever else. We had RG3 on the show Friday, and he talked about many things. We brought up the 40, and he said that what we didn't know is that that by the time they get to the 40, you could be flat out worn out with all of that goes on even before you get to that point. That he kind of described all of that, the wear and tear mentally, physically. I did not know that, and I guess you give us your background on that.
Well, my experience with that, I've never, I've done some work, in scouting, part-time work years ago, with one of the NFL combines. What Dan was working with national scouting. Dan and I have been friends for a long, long time. And I've been through the combine experience with him while he was working with the combine when he was with national back in the 90s. And the thing that I remember, actually the 80s and 90s. But the thing that I remember about it was these guys are constantly on the go. There's one combine scout assigned to them, and they take their group throughout the entire week. They take them to the physicals. They take them to the interview rooms. They take them to they're with them everywhere. And the workouts, making sure they're on time where they're supposed to be, their meals, and their time is filled up. There's no time for for any leisure at all. It's a very, very hectic, busy time where, these guys are at a job interview. Basically, they're interviewing for a job. So they want to make a good impression, not only on the field, but off the field. And that's part of where the combine scouts are there to kind of direct them. So, yeah, it's definitely an intense experience for those players.
Did anybody you guys grind to the film so much, so I know the combine either maybe confirms or maybe brings something up to you. Did anybody after the combine change your mind about where they should be?
Well, not yet. We haven't really digested everything just yet. We've got this big database of players and 300 plus players at the combine that we're going through with the speeds, and we do a little analysis of the combine workouts. That we have a guy that is into the computer, the metrics, and things like that, and he takes all the results and he puts them into a what we call the OSR, Ourlads secret recipe, or Ourlads statistical whatever we call it. But anyway, and so that we like that, and we think it's very good at predicting. It's better at predicting failure than it is success. Let's put it that way. I don't know if that makes sense, but we haven't necessarily seen anything yet that kills us, except we're a little concerned about some of the length on some of the guys, the speed of some of the guys. But we were expecting some of that because we have access to their GPS speeds, and that is really more important than, based on what you just what you guys were just saying. These guys go through it, and the 40 time is, it can be a mixed experience as far as how well it measures how fast they really can play the game. And so these GPS speeds that are out there now are probably more important when they're playing the game. They're how many miles per hour are they moving? When they're chasing, if they're a linebacker, what's their deceleration rate, their acceleration rate if they're a receiver. All those things are measured, and a lot of NFL programs now are looking much more at those than they are the 40 time, the shuttle, and all those other things. And the combine is still one piece of the puzzle, but those GPS, those metrics that are coming out now are, for some people, a lot more important. And I know some coaching staffs, one in particular, that they don't go to the combine anymore. They just use those. Their scouts go, the GM goes for the interviews, but the coaches stay home.
John, we've asked you a lot about individual prospects and kind of danced around the Big 12 a bit, since that's what we talk about a lot of times. I don't think I've ever asked you, though, about the Iowa State guys, and they have a couple of good receivers there in Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. I think cornerback Darian Porter, also a guy as well that's getting some attention. Any thoughts on the Iowa State Cyclones and in particular those receivers and also Darian Porter?
Well, I just got done watching Porter a little while ago, and I'm really, really high on him. Obviously, he ran, and I'll be honest, there's one that I'm glad you mentioned it, because he ran better than we expected. But his playing speed is very good. He's 6'2", 195 pounds, and after watching the tape, he's moved up on my board a little bit. I've watched some early games, but now that I've had a chance to see some of the late season stuff and have a lot of games under my belt with him, I'm really high on him, and so that's a great one there. Noel, I think he's also jumped up on our board. He had a great performance, but you look at the film, and he's a good football player. And the combine, as you said, confirms that 4.3940 that he posted, that vertical jump that he did, that confirms that this is a great athlete that can play, and he can change directions. Yeah, he's only 5'10". And that concerns us a little bit, but he's still a really good football player. Zay Flowers was a first-round pick, and he was a smaller guy, and he's been an explosive player in the NFL. And Jalen Noel's probably a little bit bigger. Jaden Higgins, another one. Really, did a nice job. He's just the opposite type of receiver. He's 6'4", and he still ran 4.47, and hit 39 inches in the vertical. I've got it in front of me. So, yeah, you've got three really good players. In fact, Iowa State's prospects probably, if you say who helped themselves the most as a group, those guys are it.
John, there was a lot of buzz about Jacob Parrish from Kansas State, the defensive back. And, I mean, obviously in his measurables, that was all really good. But I flipped on some highlights of him this week, and he's a dude where, while he's not like a big guy, I think he's going to help somebody. He's not afraid to put his nose in it no matter what. He's a really good tackler.
Yeah, I like him. I like him a lot. He's another guy I watched this past week, finished up and did my report on him. And he's a solid player. He's going to help somebody. You're definitely right. He can play. He's quick. He can tackle, and he can cover. He does a lot of things well.
John, there's certain players that can give off this arrogance or whatever, and Shedeur Sanders, of course, has been on the kind of on the radar. I knew that was just a matter of time someone would look at that or what he said or whatever. He's confident. He's pretty good. I don't know if he's a first-round talent or a third-round talent, but do GMs and they get turned off by someone like that, or do they kind of like that type of edge? At quarterback.
I think it depends on who you ask. I'm kind of old school about that kind of thing. Teddy Roosevelt, walk softly and carry a big stick. But there's a certain amount of confidence that I think a player has to have in order to be successful. Whether it's a quiet confidence or whether it's something that's being said, that's up to the individual. And I think some teams like that. Some coaches like that. But I can tell you right now, I know some that don't. That would bother them. So the bottom line is how they perform on the field. We've had some guys that have, like to talk and have been great players and did everything that was asked of them. So as long as Shedeur Sanders or any of those guys does what they're asked to do and they're good teammates, what they say doesn't matter all that much.
Jon Cooper with his Ourlads guide to the NFL draft. John, thank you very much. We'll try to get back on the Wednesday rotation if that's okay next week.
Sure.
Thank you. The combine's over, and 5 or 6 weeks until the NFL draft